Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Guilty, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, Ethan Hawke, Riley Keough, Peter Sarsgaard, Christina Vidal Mitchell, and Paul Dano, directed by Antoine Fuqua. This movie is, just so you guys know, available on Netflix. So if you want to watch it on Netflix, depending on how I think of the movie, then give it a look at on Netflix if you have a Netflix account. You have been told. So I'm in the unfamiliar territory with Antoine Fuqua, so let's just get straight into this movie as I watched it both times on Netflix, so let's get to it. In Los Angeles, a demoted police officer named Joe Baylor, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, has his reasons on why he is demoted, as he'll explain at the end of the film, and I'll get there when I get there. But for now, he works in a 911 caller system while he gets a call from the journalist Catherine Harbor to ask him some questions about his case, and gets a bunch of emergency calls, for example, a stolen computer and wallet, while the person is on a business trip, and connects with to Sergeant Bill Miller, played by Ethan Hawke, off screen to get on the crime scene. And the acting is good in this movie, but it's not great like in Training Day, for example. Joe gets a call from Emily Lighton, played by Riley Keough, as she is abducted by Henry Fisher, played by Peter Sarsgaard, who happens to be her ex-husband. As this movie is reminding me of another movie that had a thriller that is the same material with Halle Berry went through in the movie called The Call, if you remember that film. But this is done better than that film, in my opinion. Meanwhile, Joe loses Emily on the line and gets a call from a cop, and he checks out a white van, which doesn't turn out to be the white van with Emily, as they had a hard time seeing because of the valley being on fire. And he calls his boss, and he tries to look for a white van and calls Emily's home and gets a little girl named Abby on the line, and she tries to give Joe some information about her father Henry, and he learns he has a criminal record. And this movie is intense to watch, as I was holding my seat from start to finish. Manny asks about what's happening to him, being nosy, while Joe gets in an argument with CHP dispatcher and gets another call from Catherine Harbor and tells her to stop calling him, and while she is trying to get some information from the Los Angeles Times. And he goes to a private room to call Sergeant Miller to check on the kids, as I'm on the edge of my seat. Joe calls his ex-wife to say goodnight to his daughter, and Jess comes off like a bitch to him, so as she says he doesn't give a shit, while this woman really got on my fucking nerves. And I'm glad this material is only 90 minutes. If it were longer, it would get a little tedious after a while. Joe gets a call from an asshole in the valley that says fuck him, and when he shouts fuck you back to the motherfucker, and he calls Henry officially for the first time, and he's frightened to go back to prison, as Joe knows he's a criminal. He has a criminal record, I mean, as this is gripping onto my seat. Joe gets a phone call from Abby after getting off the phone with a friend of his named Tim, whom with his friends are police officers, as she has blood on her hands. And we learn her little brother Oliver is dead, and they hang up until Manny tells Joe he's going home. And Joe sticks around and calls Henry to give himself up, and talks about victims and tells him he should be executed. And a friend comes to Henry's place, and he's inside. There's things going on in his house while Joe calls Emily, as she's in the car, and Henry gets a biker calling for his knee to tell him to take an Uber to the hospital, which is completely irresponsible Joe to tell him off like that, as he was fucking injured. I mean, Jesus Christ. So that was completely problematic. Joe tells Emily to hit him in the head with a brick, and he tells her to breathe while she's believing he's going to die, and asks her what's her favorite food, and she says cherry Slurpees, which is technically not a food, as he tries to calm her down, and they tell they like each other, and says he deserves to get hurt. And that is some good acting by Jake Gyllenhaal, as he does a good job with this performance. Joe gets a call from another cop as Henry lost his visitation to his kids and learns he doesn't deserve after all. And like Joe, he's a divorced man and gets a call from Henry, and Joe tells Henry he needs help and also to calm down and the kids are safe. And Peter Sarsgaard does a good job at acting crazy, like the way he is in this movie. Joe gets a call from Emily and tells her Oliver is not there, and he hears cars, and she says she has blood on her hands. And the audience learns she's on the freeway with Henry's blood, and she's completely freaked the fuck out. And he tells her they're trying to help her, and they send some cop cars over, as he says it's his fault and tells her not to do something stupid. And he confesses he killed a 19-year-old boy, which was why he was demoted in the first place. And that was a twist I did not see coming, as he shouldn't be a cop anymore after that and the situation he's going through with Emily. And he tells her he promised Abby to get her home safe and sound. And this one setting in this movie was a fine choice. And Emily hangs up and the phone to be with Oliver, and the cops have her, and that monologue that Joe gave to Emily is the best scene in the whole movie. Meanwhile, Joe is depressed as he saves Emily's life, and Tim leaves a message saying that Oliver was alive all this time, as he was at a hospital in Los Angeles, and Abby is safe and sound, and goes in the bathroom and coughs and vomits and learns he is the guilty, as he goes to prison and talks to Catherine Harbor. And the climax was very intense, as that was the best part of the movie, as I was satisfied by the way this movie ended. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 6.2 out of 10. The acting is good, but it's not great like in Training Day, as the movie is very intense to watch, as I was holding on to my seat from start to finish. I like the characters fine, as this isn't director Antoine Fuqua's best work, as this is a better version of the Halle Berry movie The Call, which is a movie I don't like as much as this movie, as the confession by Jake Gyllenhaal's character is the best scene in the movie, in my opinion. I'm glad this movie was only 90 minutes of this material. If it were longer, it would get a little tedious after a while. And at the end of the day, it was a good movie. Not a great movie by any means, as this is a recommendation. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Emancipation. And until then, try not to get guilty. Guilty as charged.